rolling.
All right. This right here talks about the 1925 Army War College study, which came after World War I, which claimed that African Americans didn't have the physical or mental capacity to do anything complicated like the combat pilots, that they could only do things like manual labor, and that they were cowards. That's what this statement here talks about. But it was an election year coming up in 1940. President Roosevelt was running for re-election for a third term. He needed African American votes in the North in order to win. He was getting a lot of political pressure from civil rights groups, from the black press at the time, from Eleanor Roosevelt, as well as one of Eleanor Roosevelt's best friends was a leader of what was unofficially called the Black Cabinet.
Okay.
There was a group of black advisors to President Roosevelt on civil rights matters and other issues dealing with African Americans. Mary McLeod Bethune, they just put a statue of in the Capitol a few months ago. She was very good friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, so of course she talked to Eleanor, and Eleanor talked to Franklin, and he was under a lot of political pressure, as well as his Republican opponent was making some headway because he was saying that if he got elected, he would allow African Americans to serve within the Army Air Corps. So of course President Roosevelt had to make the same promise so that he could get, not lose the black vote. But the first thing he did was in 1939, they started what was called the Civilian Pilot Training Program, which we have. I don't know if you got any of these.
I will.
Okay, I can give you a set. That's on the Civilian Pilot Training Program. So it's on women in aviation and the role of Tuskegee Institute.
Thank you.
The Civilian Pilot Training Program was started, the idea was to train young Americans as pilots in case of a military emergency. It was based on similar programs that had been started in Europe before they got involved in World War II. They had it at both black schools and white schools. If you were a white graduate of the Civilian Pilot Training Program and you applied to join the Army Air Corps, which is what the Air Force was called at that time, it was still part of the Army, your application would be considered and you would more than likely be accepted. If you were an African American graduate of the Civilian Pilot Training Program and you applied to join the Army Air Corps, your application would be rejected. They had the Civilian Pilot Training Program at 6 African American colleges, including Tuskegee, Howard, and Hampton, as well as 2 black-run flight schools out of the Chicago area. Chicago was a very important area for African American aviation. Chicago and Los Angeles were 2 of the places in the 30s that had a lot of African American pilots, civilian pilots. And so in 1940, they passed what was known as the Selective Service Act, which was the draft. It had an anti-bias clause in it. You were not supposed to discriminate when it came to recruitment or training. So when Yancey Williams, who had graduated from, hello, how are you? Good. You got it. Okay. So when Yancey Williams, who had graduated from the Civilian Pilot Training Program at Howard University in Washington, D.C., applied to join the Army Air Corps, and his application was rejected because he was African American. He sued with the help of the NAACP.
Oh, wow.
Before the case went to trial, President Roosevelt announced that he would be starting a segregated program for African American pilots within the Army Air Corps. and they were going to locate it here in Tuskegee.
Okay.
They chose Tuskegee for a number of reasons. One of them was climate, good flying weather year round. Say the temperature here is a lot better than it would be, say, in Chicago. Land was cheap and plentiful. They had considered California, but California was far too expensive, even in the 1940s, to put up, you know, because you need a lot of land for airports. And also because of Tuskegee Institute. Tuskegee Institute had all the facilities necessary for the ground school training. It had places for the airmen to live while they were at this stage of training. It also had the only African-American run veterans hospital in the country. After World War I, President Moulton, who this field is named for, donated 300 acres of land from Tuskegee Institute to the federal government for the building of a veterans hospital. Because after World War I, there was no place that the black veterans could go to receive proper care. If they went to a regular veterans hospital, if they got treated at all, they got put in the basement. And you get what you get. If you die, you die, basically. Here we had the black doctors, we had black administrators, black nurses. That was the what President Moulton insisted upon, to have the hospital built here. That it be a black-run facility to make sure that the patients got the care that they deserve. So those were some of the positive reasons for it. Another reason for it was going to be a segregated program, so they put it in the segregated South. In Alabama in the 1940s, of course, was from 1941 until 1947. No, 46. Yeah, 46. And then they moved to Ohio, outside Columbus, Lockbourne, until 1948 when they started the desegregation of the military. That's where the 332nd moved after World War II.
We can kind of move through the
Sure,
hangar,
sure.
and then I'll get, just a real overlayment of.
This is a model of the Duchess Arlene. That's the plane that we have hanging up from the ceiling over in hangar number 2. And of course, it tells a little bit about who was the pilot and everything. And actually, that was the first time I discovered that the Tumble Owl was actually a real place and not something made up for the TV show MASH. Radar was from the Tumble
That's
Owl.
not super far from where I am.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a real place. But this is the training here that they went through from the beginning all the way to getting put into your units here. They separated, they had 2 different types of, you had the single engine, which were the fighter pilots, but you also had twin engines, which were a bombardier group. They started a bombardier group, the 477, and this right here tells a little bit about that. The film goes a little bit in more detail about it. They never went overseas. They were to have fought in the Pacific theater against the Japanese. Unfortunately, their commanding officer was a segregationist. So he sabotaged the training. But the commanding officer here, that gentleman at the end there, Noel Parrish, and there's also a picture of him right there with Richmond O. Davis Jr. and Sr. He was from Kentucky, but he believed in, there it is, what he had to say. And this talks about them confronting Jim Crow for the first time. We have, I think I read in one of the, I think it was A Train, Dryden, I think it was it Dryden? Colonel Dryden talked about him coming down south for the first time. He was from New York, what they call them, A-Train, from the Duke Ellington song, and how once they crossed the Mason-Dixon line, they had him go to the segregated car, which was dirty and filthy, and here he is, this nice military uniform and everything. And then when it was time for him to get a meal, they were gonna put a screen around him so that the other passengers wouldn't see him. And he got mad and went back to the black car, colored car, as they called it at the time. And one of the older women there gave him some of her meal, some of her fried chicken. And I was born in '61. I remember when we traveled from here, you know, anywhere pretty much. We couldn't stop at the restaurants. A few nights before, my mom would fix meals for us to take on the road. And we would have something where if we had to use the restroom, we had a pot that we could do our business in, so to speak. I don't think it was until like '67 I remember us being able to stop when we traveled.